Justice, that how do you plan to hold the judiciary accountable? Madam Judge, you know, this country, we also represent litigants in Parliament who have suffered in the hands of the judiciary. And when you complain about judiciary is known for invoking the independence of judiciary. You can't speak about them. They live in their own world. You say something about them, you are in trouble. There are problems of delayed judgments, miscarriage of justice, misconduct of judicial officers, and there are many cases pending at the JSC which require either disciplinary action or tribunal. There are many issues that you need to handle. So how do you intend to hold the judiciary as the leader of that institution, to hold them accountable? My second question, Madam Judge, is how will you handle the pending 41 judges that have been refused to be sworn in? Because now if you become the leader of that institution, what do you think you will do that will make sure those judges are sworn as approved by the JSC, or what mechanism do you want to put in place to break that stalemate? Because that stalemate has appeared before this committee many times. My last question is, you have led you had held many leadership positions, both in judiciary and outside judiciary. Some of them were in the civil society. And the civil society has done a lot of work for this country. Part of the democracy that we enjoy in this country today was achieved through the civil society. And while you are also the chair of FIDA, I can tell you, when men used to hear FIDA, they can pee on their pants. They used to fear FIDA like something else. So now, how are you, and you know, the civil society is known for believing in idealism, ideal situations. But sometimes when you are in a leadership position, that might not be the point. For example, the civil society, you know, they advance, for example, the protection of LGBT community. For example, our constitution maybe is debatable, religious issues. How are you going to balance those differences in the society as the leader of the judiciary? Thank you.
Shamala? No, let me get, you want to go after? Yes, Shamala?
Lady Justice Martha Koome, should this committee and the National Assembly approve your nomination, you will become the most powerful woman in this country, heading one of the 3 state organs where all sovereign power, of which all sovereign power is delegated to. I think, and definitely judges don't come under the public scrutiny that politicians do and the executive does. Who is Martha Koome the person? Who is Martha Koome the family woman? Ultimately, how would you want Kenyans to remember your tenure if you are approved and your legacy for the judiciary?
Ruch. Ruch.
Respond to those 3, but I can ask.
Yes.
If that's okay. Okay, thank you very much again, Lady Justice. I'm going to try and engage you on 2 issues. First of all, on your judicial philosophy and jurisprudence, and secondly, to engage you on your understanding on a few principles. And I understand this is not in the context of re-interviewing you, but so that you use this as an opportunity to give us your, judicial philosophy and how you will guide this ship. And I want to begin by reading to you a very brief paragraph by Professor Githu Muigai, former Attorney General, in an article he wrote, Political Jurisprudence or Neutral Principles, another look at the problem of constitutional interpretation. And briefly, what he says, among other things, is that the jurisprudence of the constitutional interpretation in Kenya is in dire need of rejuvenation. So I have bracketed there, do you agree? And then he goes on to say, in formulating principles of constitutional construction, cognizance must be taken of the fact that both pro-neutral and anti-neutral principles agree on some fundamentals? And then I've bracketed there, are you familiar with what Professor Githu is referring to neutral principles, and are you pro-neutral or anti-neutral in the construction on constitutional interpretation? Finally, he goes on to say that, fifthly, the judicial role is a political role, and therefore the judiciary is a political actor within our democracy. And then I have bracketed there, do you agree that the judiciary is a political actor within our democracy? If so, why? And if not, how not? And then in conclusion, he says, complex constitutional disputes involve balancing competing interests or claims and invite value choices. So the last question there is, what is your understanding of how you would go about balancing competing claims in complex questions, both political or otherwise, and what is your understanding of value choices? I have another which I will allow her to answer, and if time permitting, later I can ask, but I want to allow her to respond to this. Thank you.
Okay, you go for take those, Judge.
Yeah, thank you very much for those questions, honorable members. I think from Honorable Resunda, it was a comment about corruption, which is a shared concern, what we can all do to make sure that cases involving corruption are expeditiously dealt with so that Kenyans can move on. And what I would need to emphasize is that we can strengthen the National Council on the Administration of Justice. And I mentioned that we can have an act of parliament that actually gives powers and mandate to the NCAJ to deal with these matters that require interdependence and require us working together, because no one of those bodies will be able to deal with the corruption without the other. Even if the judiciary is so efficient, if the police are not, if the ODPP is not, we cannot deal with corruption. And then about the family, you asked a question, and a judge is always very shy and very cautious to express themselves in matters that may come to court. But when it comes to the age of criminal responsibility, the law is clear that anyone under the age of 18 is a minor. So even if it's a boy who has committed an offense when he is under the age of 18, we treat them as a child in need of care and protection. We recommend them to be counseled, and we are also, and even from a child rights defender, I would not recommend lowering the age of sexual responsibility, because already, you know, we are battling with early child marriage. We want our children to be in school, and there is no hurry to lower that age, which is internationally recognized as the age of responsibility, 18 years. And the other question was from Honorable Junet about making the judiciary accountable. It is in the Constitution that the power that is given to the judiciary, the judges, judicial officers, we are accountable. We are accountable under the Constitution. We are accountable under the Leadership and Integrity Act. We are accountable under the Code of Conduct, which this August committee passed recently. And we are bound to be accountable in terms of our time. When we come to work between 8 and 5, we must fill in a form to show what it is that we did. If you have delayed judgments, then you are supposed to explain to the head of the division or the head of the court station why the judgment is delayed. So I agree there are some cracks, because we have cases that have been pending for many years, but those are administrative issues to be handled. There are instruments already in place that require very serious accountability. The problem is the implementation. And you asked about the pending case of 40 judges who have not taken office, and this has affected the human resource register capital. Like the Court of Appeal where I sit, we are just on the threshold. The Constitution requires that we should not be less than 12 judges of appeal. And as I sit here, we are almost there. So it is of utmost urgency that these 40 judges are sworn in office. So I will negotiate because, like I said, I have very good negotiation skills. If there are problems with some, that problem can also be sorted out, because if you have a problem as a judge, it must be sorted out one way or the other. Then you have asked the law of the civil society. You have commended them for doing great work, especially in the struggle for democratization and good governance. And I think they continue to fill the gap whenever there is a gap, even in representing people who cannot afford legal services and looking at the vulnerable groups in the society. So they play a critical role in our society to ensure that all the vulnerable groups, their human rights, their human dignity is protected. And Honorable Shamara has asked me to comment about what am I going to bring at the table as a woman reader. I'm just going to bring excellence. I'm just going to bring commitment in the delivery of service, because this is what I have done all these years. When I sat in Nakuru, we started the court user committee, bringing the stakeholders at the table so that we could discuss and find solutions. And at the end of it, I'm going to ensure that there is access to justice. I was instrumental in starting mobile courts in Kakuma and in Lokicha, and we will continue to make justice accessible. And at the end of it, I would like to be referred as a champion for justice, one who made the judiciary an efficient institution that engenders the confidence of Kenyans from all walks of life, achieve justice for all Kenyans, children, men, business people, improving commercial court and access to justice also for business people, so that their disputes can be finished quickly. And the last question was, what is my judicial philosophy? Before the Constitution of 2010, we were struggling to understand or to ascribe the judicial philosophy of each judge. I think then I was a liberal, progressive jurist because my judgments are progressive. But now, thanks be to the Constitution 2010, the principles that we embrace in interpreting the law are all provided for in the chapter, in Article 10, in 232. We must be progressive. We must look at this Constitution as if it is speaking. We must look at this Constitution as a document that is alive, that we should breathe life to it all the time. So the questions the Honorable Member asked me are very difficult to say whether they are correct or not. I'm just there in the middle to say that in every interpretation that I do, I am guided by the Constitution, and the Constitution is progressive, it is liberal, it emphasizes on respect for human rights, human dignity, and where one is able to realize their potential. And every judgment you deliver, you are supposed to ask yourself how it affects the persons, the children, the women, the men, the political class, and everybody. So that is how I would answer that question on judicial philosophy, that it is founded. The principles are all founded in the Constitution of Kenya 2010, and we can name 159, we can name the chapters, the articles that provide the interpretation principles. Thank you.
Very well, Judge. Honorable Vice Chair.
Thank you very much. I was waiting in the queue, but now I have to be served last because I'm Vice Chair. Honorable Lady.
Then let Kaluma then go.
You want to go ahead of me?
Yeah, Chair, because of ranking, maybe I use this occasion to say why under our standing orders, for the first time during vetting, I'm not going to put forth a question. Okay. The CJ nominee has mentored my wife who works in the judiciary from the days she was in FEDA to date. Now, because of that, we consider a family friend. I'm not going to put any question.
Very well.
CJ, there is also a compliment we have on record from the CRADO, which is the Children's Foundation run by the Honorable Millie Grace Akoto Diambo. Millie is my niece. Because of that also, I will withdraw. So I wish you well. I wish you well. Thank you.
TJ.
Thank you, Member for Homa Bay. Lady Justice, I have just follow-up questions, supplementary questions, because many of us have literally asked perhaps everything that could have been asked. Maybe just to reinforce so that the nation hears you very clearly on some issues. You know, Article 245 of the Constitution mandates the Judicial Commission to report at the end of every financial year certain things to the President and to Parliament. Now, your predecessors took a rather condescending attitude towards the I know the member for Suna wants me to continue to suffocate.
Is the member asking as the Vice Chair of the committee or as the People's Chief Justice? Which title are you using?
Yeah, you see, I'm already in office even when we are looking for the Chief Justice of the Republic of Kenya, but the People's Chief Justice will always be there. Yeah, so your predecessors took a fairly dim view, I must say, about Parliament or the legislative arm of government in terms that they felt they would not oblige to the jurisdiction of Parliament. I remember in one hearing of the Chief Justice Willie Mutunga and the former Chief Justice David Maraga, he said that as the head of the institution, he cannot come before us. He cannot come and sit where you are sitting before a committee, because that therefore lowers the dignity, or what he perceived as the dignity, of the judiciary. And so what he did would be to, both of them, would be to continuously send the registrar, to interact with us. Now, whereas the registrar has a function, administrative and the secretary to the commission, but the president of this republic, being the head of the executive himself, comes to Parliament and addresses Parliament on various issues as mandated by the Constitution. Do you consider yourself to be in this school of thought who thinks that merely interacting with the legislature is an affront to the dignified stature of the judiciary in terms of Article 245 and so on. That's number one. Number two, I've just recaptured what I had one of my colleagues ask you about your relations. We want you to be very specific how you will relate with Parliament, both Senate and the National Assembly, without, of course, lowering the perceived dignity of the judiciary. Number two, I've had a chance of reading as many of the decisions as I could get. And you are very strong on family law. And you have postulates, your jurisprudential postulates are very firm and some of them very interesting. One of them is what I find controversial as jurisprudence on patriarchy. You find many of the laws in this land are designed, so to speak, in what you call, are designed in a patriarchal basis. And that is the substance of one of the people who have written to us in opposing your appointment, a gentleman called James Kamuthi Kibunja. In a case which you did, and that case you are familiar with because it has been coming up and every time, about a case of custody, child custody. The problem, the concern, what is disturbing is that you handle that case without hearing the father of that child. You did not hear, you heard what lawyers called ex parte. Now, I'm putting that together with the issue around gender, right? If you become the Chief Justice, the office of the Chief Justice and the office of the Deputy Chief Justice will be from one gender. Now, I want you to speak to the other gender, not your own. Do they have a cause of concern? You seem not to have found value to hear the father of that child. And you will be two members of one gender. And you have been very strong when you were in FIDA or in the civil society before you came to the judiciary on matters pertaining to women's rights. Would you consider yourself, this is very fair, would you consider yourself a feminist? And do people of the other gender have anything to fear in your leadership as a Chief Justice? The last one is this, that you are older than me, but fairly young. If you are appointed the Chief Justice, you will be around for some 10 or so years if God gives you the health. And you have, you know, what Honorable Member for Madari has been asking, you have made certain positions in your jurisprudential outlook. Do you think, in terms of expansion of jurisprudence, in terms of expansion of knowledge in that area, Kenya would be saddled with some of your jurisprudential outlook? For the next 10 years or so, we'd have to live with your views about certain things. In terms of expanding our jurisprudence, how does that sit with you?
I think you want to add? Yes,
yeah,
but
no, I just want to put, you know, he's a lawyer. He has put it in legal. I want to put it plain to the judge.
No,
this House of Record is good. You dispense it off with it once and for all. There is talk and rumor that you are a feminist and you hate men. Please clarify that.
Just the same.
Let us try. I will allow you, but let us try to cover. If something is covered, let us not delve on it too much. Yes? Let us hear you, Mheshimiwa Kamote.
Yeah, Chair, as the judge addresses that, maybe she can, maybe in one line, give us her personal conviction on same-sex relationships.
Yes.
Thank you very much, honorable members, for those questions. I will begin with the interaction and the collaboration between the judiciary and this august house. It is true, every year the judiciary has to submit a report. The state of the judiciary report is submitted to the parliament regularly. But I noted when I was preparing for this interview that there are no rules or guidelines on how we do the follow-up on issues arising, because in every report there must be a review of what needed to be done, especially where we need collaboration. So this is something that in this roundtable meeting we are going to discuss. I recall Chief Justice Emeritus Dr. Willy Mutunga called the Senate and I think also a meeting with the National Assembly. The committee met with the judges to discuss the challenges that we face. If I'm privileged to be approved by this August House, my role is to implement the Constitution. I'm a mere servant of the Constitution. What the Constitution says I should do, I will do. If the Constitution requires me to appear before this House, and we will discuss that at the round table, I wear power very thinly myself. This power is exercised on behalf of the people of Kenya. This power is exercised for the best interests of Kenyans. If it requires me to come and sit here and answer to this august committee some issues, I will do that. If it requires us to sit in another setting, which is a roundtable meeting, we will do that because we are doing it all for the best interests of the Kenyans. And then the question was asked about patriarchy, that I have to Constitution. And the parties are at liberty to appeal if they are aggrieved by my decision. A question was raised about a case that I'm said to have given a custody of a child ex parte, and I remember that case. It is when I was in Kitare. It was an interim order. A magistrate had ordered that the children be given to the father. The father had separated with the mother for some years, several years, like 3 years. Then the mother died. The children were left with the maternal parents and aunties. The father went to court and said he